Hello, I'm W.T. Edmonson and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, the faith community is coming together in Jefferson City to discuss and address issues and concerns of the community throughout the states. On January the 12th, 2012, at the state capitol, an economic dignity campaign for families will be on Front Street. We have with us Reverend Jeanie McGowan. She's the associate pastor of First Baptist Church here in Jefferson City. We also have Reverend David Henry, associate pastor of First Presbyterian Church here in Jefferson City. And they will share with us a little bit of information about this upcoming event and what it's all about and how you and others in the community can get involved. This will be a statewide event at the state capitol, I understand. So without any further ado, Reverend McGowan and Reverend Henry, welcome to Focus.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's talk about what's going to be taking place here at Jefferson City at the state capitol on January the 12th. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, after a meeting, a gathering of clergy, pastors from around the state for lunch and to visit about the issues that we are focusing on, we'll be traveling to the Capitol, and we will disperse throughout the Capitol to visit with legislators about these issues that we feel are issues that affect the people, particularly the most vulnerable people of our churches and our communities.
Why is it important that the clergy get involved in such activities such as this?
Well, I think there's a long history of clergy being involved in social justice issues, and particularly the issues that affect the poorest in our communities. And so we need the prophetic voice of the clergy in the community and throughout the state to raise the issues and to come at the issues from a theological perspective, from a faith perspective, and to share our beliefs and our thoughts about the issues for others.
Tell me something. You know, just observation, just from observation, the everyday Joe don't see the church getting involved in community issues other than, you know, maybe feeding the poor through, food, soup lines and stuff like that, soup kitchens, and maybe passing out food from your shelves in your church and so forth. But getting involved in actual personal issues that people have to deal with, the everyday Joe don't really see very much of that. Mm-hmm. This would make it a little bit more prevalent to the everyday person to see what the faith community is really doing, right?
We hope that would be true. I think we've often been criticized in the church from not being more actively involved in the really basic needs of those in our community, from more catering to those who are within our church than those without or beyond the walls. Mm-hmm. And for some of us, that's been a burden for a long time, and we've not always been sure quite how to address it, or did we have any the power, the means to be able to address it. And we're beginning to find our way and to find ways that we can do that. And that's one of the reasons for putting together a coalition of churches and church faith leaders who see that and have a passion for wanting to make those who feel often that they are powerless and voiceless, to give them a voice and to let them know there is hope and that there might be some change that we could actually affect.
Mm. Tell me something. You were about to say something?
Well, W.T., I think those who are in need come to the church.
Right.
We see it every day in
Yes.
our churches here in Jefferson City, in the downtown area, but all around, of folks coming in with very real needs because they're looking to the church to help with those needs. And if all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid on it, giving that bag of groceries or providing that one meal, but not looking at the issues that cause them to be there, then I think we're falling short of what we're called to do.
There's always a systemic reason why people have certain problems and issues. How did the clergy finally come together to sit around the table? How did that come about?
Well, I think there was a vision from a pastor in Kansas City, the Reverend Wallace Hartsford of Metropolitan Baptist Church, a primarily black church, and that church traditionally has had more of an ear from the poor. And it became such a burden on his heart that not only did their church want to reach out, but why couldn't he gather other clergy from around the state and find out if there weren't others who felt the same burden, and that together we'd have more power, a bigger voice and a presence when we go to the Capitol, if we came together rather than just going one at a time at different times. So it was really his vision that brought us together for the Missouri Interreligious Roundtable.
Okay. Now there's been a statewide organization formed, the Missouri Faith Voices. What is the relationship with this organization with communities creating opportunities? That's a faith-based organization out of Kansas City. How is that, what kind of relationship is that, and how did it come together?
Well, the organization that Jeanie was referring to earlier, that Reverend Hartsfield helped initiate in the Kansas City area, is the organization that brought this kind of vision to some of the clergy here in Jefferson City several years ago. And they felt the need, and we felt the need also, for a statewide organization rather than just groups in Kansas City, St. Louis, Jefferson City, banding together with a stronger voice if we all worked together and communicated together and went to the Capitol together.
Under one umbrella.
Right.
Exactly.
I guess that also provides a little bit more, it makes it a little bit more palatable for individual congregations to speak out on an issue. It's not just one church anymore.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the process. What will actually take place on January the 12th? What will actually occur on that day?
Well, besides the clergy coming together for lunch, and we expect anywhere from 50 to 75 from around the state busing in and coming in, then we will go to the Capitol, and we've been doing this for several years and going and talking with various legislators about these needs and how we feel that they have not been addressed, and try not to be just a negative voice, but to build some relationships at the Capitol so that they begin to recognize us and they realize we're not just a wacky group out there, but we have serious concerns about our state. And then that evening, we're having a call to action rally here in town that's somewhat connected, but beyond clergy, people of faith coming together to learn more about particularly one issue that we're focusing on right now, and that's trying to cap the rate on the predatory lending that's so prevalent in our communities, and it is draining so many of the resources from our people.
Well, let me go directly to that, okay?
Okay.
Now, you know, one of the, as I did my little research here, the interest rate, as far as I see, the initiative will be to place a state ballot initiative to cap the interest rate and penalties that are currently 400%. Is that right? Or that's what you will try to bring it to?
No, the average spent right now interest rate on these kinds of loans is 445%, which is outrageous. It can even go higher, but what we would like to see is to cap that interest rate so that no more than 36%, which seems really high anyway, but this is a rate that notoriously or historically through the banking and financial industry has been the very top. There was a bill brought when Jim Talent was in Congress. He brought several years ago, and it passed so that our military families could not be charged more than that because they were seeing the harm done to them. And we're saying, hey, if it's good for the military families, it's good for us too, that we don't charge any more than that, even though that seems high. And that we also make some extensions on the time that can be paid back, so it's not a 2-week turnaround. Most of us, if we're in a real financial crunch and we need a quick loan, if we knew we could get that money together in 2 weeks, we wouldn't be going to a payday loan in the first place.
Correct.
So it's out of that crisis mode that people go, even knowing it may cost them a lot more. But what they end up paying for these loans because they can't pay it back in 2 weeks is just horrible.
So what kind of reception has the organization gotten from previous years that this discussion has taken place?
You want to address that?
Well, in previous years, we've had the ear of the governor and the lieutenant governor. We've met with a number of legislators. I think they have heard us. They have heard the message. It's been a little different message each year. We talked a couple of years ago about the health care issues. We're moving on to the issues that Jeanie has spoken about at this point. But I do feel that we're being heard, and I think the momentum that we're building by involving more and more clergy and people of faith will get us the attention of more of those over at the Capitol.
Okay.
One of the historic, we have made numerous attempts over the years on this particular issue of the interest rates and the legislation of the controls of payday lending. And as hard as we've worked, there have been a few other bills that have been introduced, but they did very little. There was very little change, and they were not open at all to the kind of changes that we felt would bring real reform and make a real difference. And that's why an initiative petition now is being introduced so that it can come to the ballot and come to the people. Millions of dollars have been spent in other states by the lending agencies, which are mostly out-of-state big companies and big banks, to see that this doesn't happen. Missouri's the worst state in 50 states for for this to happen, and I think we're 3 times. Mississippi's the next worst, and we're 3 times worse than they are. But so there's a lot of money being spent. But each state that this has been addressed by the people, we've defeated the big money being poured in on it, and have won the right to bring these rates down. So we really feel like, even though it's a Goliath, a giant, that we have right on our side, and people's good sense and goodwill on our sides to help bring this to pass.
Well, I guess Missouri is similar to Dakota when it comes to the credit cards. A lot of credit cards come out of Dakotas because the legislature had made it very receptive to that, and so credit card companies go there and operate out of there, even though their home base is really not there. And so these payday lending institutions, their home base is not Missouri, but they come here because, such a tremendous rate that they can capture.
Right, they're making more money here than any other state. Even Arkansas, our neighbor to the south, it's only 17% that's allowed. And we are.
Yeah, I was amazed when I read that to see that our neighbor Arkansas has a cap of 17%.
Right.
Exactly.
And we're only asking for 36%.
Yeah.
You know, well, I tell you, I think it would be very difficult for the legislature to not be receptive to the conversation that will be had, looking at the plight of their citizens and the thing that they're going through. Because if their communities are anything like Jefferson City, every street you go on, somewhere it seems like there's a payday loan institution.
Well, there's actually more payday loans in Missouri than there are McDonald's and Starbucks combined. And we think there's McDonald's in every little town and
Yeah.
every corner, you know, several in a community. You would think that would be true, that the goodwill of our citizens, the best, but that's not been the reception that we've had, even when we've presented these facts. They have seemed to believe some myths. There's some myths out there. One of them says, if we don't provide this for people who are perhaps poor, there's no place to go. That's not true. In nearly every community, there are some banks that have some resources just for this kind of situation, as we do here in Jefferson City. Another myth is that, just lost my train of thought, that they're so high risk. That's why they have to have these huge interest rates, because these are high risk. And the truth is that the risk rate is, the default rate is about 6%, less than some, and that's about what a bank's is, and it's even higher, better than a credit card default. So that just doesn't carry any weight at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems as though the ballot initiative probably is the best route to go.
Exactly.
Because this way, if the legislator needs something to hide behind the citizens of the state, right? Okay, let's talk about here, as the clergy step out front and tackle some of these very serious community issues. There are those within our congregations who feel that that is not the responsibility of their pastor, right? How do you, as representatives of your congregation, address that?
Well, I would again point to the historic reality that's there, that the prophets of old spoke out against the ills that they saw, the injustices, the oppression that they saw, and were a strong voice for that. I think the church historically has had that voice. Sometimes, yes, it has been covered up, and sometimes it's been muted. But I think in reality, that's part of our call as clergy, as pastors, to speak up for those who don't have a voice to speak for themselves, or whose voices are not being heard. You're right, there are those who would say that's not the role of the church. But again, I think folks are coming to the church to hear that and want to be given some guidance on how they can fulfill their faith in action in our community.
It's pretty hard to read the biblical texts, if the Bible is your book of faith, where there's over 2,000 verses that talk about how God feels about the poor and what God expects us to do for the poor. And so if someone doesn't understand that, the only thing we can do is encourage them to just keep reading and keep digging, because it's biblical, and that's what we're trying to do, is preach the truth.
Well, Jesus took care of the money changers, didn't he?
Yeah, that's one example, yes.
Now, as we look at the situation, one of the other issues that will be coming forward, I understand, we'll be talking about minimum wage. That's really going to be a really, really tough issue with the economy being what it is now. What is the approach that you will be taking relative to that?
Well, for one thing, people don't always understand the issues, but for every dollar that the minimum wage is raised, there's almost $3,000 worth of business money generated into the community from that person that wasn't there previously. And so, and also the small business owner can compete a little better with the big box stores and the larger companies with a competitive rate to hire people. So there's a win-win in providing enough that people can meet their basic needs. It's pretty tough to make your basic needs on $15,000 a year and pay the rent, buy your groceries. It leaves absolutely no space for any kind of an extra emergency. Even a simple car repair can put them in serious debt problem. And so we need to be able to, people that work so hard in service areas, our child care providers, our people that work hard labor, need to be honored by a decent wage for their hard work.
Well, I know that's going to be a tremendous fight, just looking at the fight that took place at the national level relative to minimum wage. But the fight has to be waged somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I guess as the legislature comes back into session, and there are a number of bills and so forth that have been pre-filed. I did not, in my quick scan, I did not see anything about minimum wage.
You may be right. I don't know. I haven't seen the pre-filing bills.
So if that's the case, then there's a tremendous battle to be waged. But tell me about this. The theme of the gatherings seemed to center around the Good Samaritan and the Jericho Road. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, I think we're back to the reality that there are those in our community who are hurting, like the one who was beaten and robbed on the road. And we as people of faith want to step into that role of the Good Samaritan, want to step into that role. We are in that role of reaching out to the one who has been oppressed, has been unfairly treated, the one who is beaten down, and to provide some sort of care, some sort of compassionate ministry to the one in need.
I guess the thing is that whether an individual is strongly rooted in any particular faith or not, when they get in trouble, they do seem to seek out the church, don't they?
Yes, the church and prayer.
Yeah,
Resources that are often gone to.
Yeah.
The only place they hope they can find compassion and help.
Well, so it is incumbent upon the faith community when that individual who has been questioning God, whether there is a God, questioning his own faith or her own faith, and then when they do get up enough nerve to broach the doors of the church needs to be receptive.
That's right.
I think it needs to be open and welcoming, but also to be there to provide some sort of guidance and, in many cases, some sort of help for the person.
How is the church going about not just feeding that person a fish, but teaching that person how to fish? How will you or the organization deal with that particular issue? Because some of the problems that some of these individuals are in, it's because they don't know how to go about managing what they have.
Right.
Any idea on that?
One of the things that we hope will come about as we locally join together as people of faith in organizing under Jefferson City Congregations Uniting is to be able to, first of all, listen to the voices of the people and hear what those needs are. We're not going to presuppose that we know what the need is, but listen to them, really listen, and then come together, pooling our minds, our ideas, our creativity to try to find how can we not just put Band-Aids on, but how can we get at the root of some of these systemic problems, whether it's providing some classes, whether it's some one-on-one mentoring. There's just a lot of different ways, and some cases we'll have to have a different way than another. But I think when we work together, putting all of our heads together to work together in our hands and our hearts, we can do some of the things that have been neglected and haven't been done, and have just led us to do the Band-Aid thing, give a little here and there, and hope that helps them.
Yeah. In getting close to wrapping it up here, quickly, again for us, tell us why it is important for a diverse group of individuals to come together who profess their faith, profess to believe in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, if that is their belief. But whatever their faith is, that diverse group comes together to address the issue of the everyday man.
Well, I think part of it is that this is not, these are not issues that are just one denomination or just one faith group or just one group of people of faith. These are issues that affect us all. And there is a stronger voice when we work together, when we're able to share ideas and thoughts and education from our various faith traditions and bring them together and share them. And from that comes, I think, a stronger message that we proclaim and live out in our faith.
Okay.
It's easy to kind of live in a bubble and think that everybody else, mostly, is kind of like we are. And when we hear of extreme cases of poverty or people that have been treated unjustly, we think, well, those are just rare things. But when we come together and we listen to each other's stories and we hear, this happened in my family, this happened to my next door neighbor, this happened to so-and-so that I work with, we begin to see that these things aren't just isolated things. They're very, very common, and this gap between rich and poor, which has become so extreme in our society today in this country, there's so many hurting people. And if we just wear blinders and we just meet with our folks that look and act and dress and just like we do, we don't see those things. We're oblivious to them. And if we don't come together to work on them, they're not going to be helped. They're just going to get worse.
And I believe strongly that legislators appreciate being given that push. Many times that's all they need, that push, because they have so many issues, and maybe they may be going against any decision that they make. They're going to be going against one constituents or the other,
Right?
And so they need that push to make that ultimate decision that is needed. Well, in closing, could you again tell us when, where, and why? Okay.
Well, we'd like to invite everyone to come next Thursday night on January the 12th out to the St. Joseph's Church, around behind it in the diocese office. That's where we're gathering at 6:30. Other people of faith coming together to see how much we have in common, to see what we can do to begin to address some things, particularly this predatory lending situation. And beyond that, on Martin Luther King Sunday, which is the very next Sunday after that, we're encouraging churches to take some time in their worship to remember the things that Dr. King worked so hard for and the change that he was able to bring about in a nonviolent way, in a peaceful way, and to know that the work is not done. There's still racism, there's still bigotry, there's still a lot of hatred, and that we need to remember that the Bible calls us to justice, to unity, to work together as people of faith. Even if we don't agree with every bit of our interpretation of our faith, there's so many things we do agree upon that we can work together.
Yeah. And now, when is the event taking place at the Capitol?
That will be next Thursday afternoon, starting around 2:15 in the afternoon. The meeting of clergy will be from noon till 2, and that will also be at the Catholic Center on West Main Street. And then following that, we'll go to the Capitol and then meet with the legislators and others at that point.
And we'd love for anyone to join us at the Capitol too, at 2:15.
Well, Reverend McGowan, Reverend Hendrick.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and sharing. Well, we hope that the little bit that has been shared with you, that it caught your attention. There are those within our community that are hurting, and hopefully that you will see that there is a need for the faith community to come together and address those issues that if no one else addressed, the faith community should be about addressing those. We'll see you next time. God bless.